Welcome back. And of course, what we just heard there was a little piece of the Tom Petty classic Breakdown, featuring some typically tasteful guitar work by Mike Campbell, the first of our 5 most underrated rock guitarists. Everybody's heard of Tom Petty. A lot of people have not heard of Mike Campbell. And it's a shame because I think he played a huge role in the success of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Campbell and Petty had actually played together long before the Heartbreakers in a band called Mudcrutch, which gained some popularity around Gainesville, Florida in the early 70s, but then disbanded after releasing only one poor-selling single. But they reunited in '76 for the Heartbreakers, and the rest is history. By the way, Campbell had other successes aside from Tom Petty. This guy co-wrote Boys of Summer and The Heart of the Matter with Don Henley, both huge hits in the 80s. Campbell is one of those guys that never tries to blow you away with his virtuosity, but he comes up with these incredibly hooky earworm riffs that leave you humming them for days after. The part we heard from Breakdown earlier is a great example, but we can go on and on. Another personal fave has always been that little refrain he does in Stop Dragging My Heart Around, the duet between Tom Petty and Stevie Nicks. Notice how much space he leaves. It's so simple, just E minor pentatonic stuff, and ending with this little E7 triad, root, major third, flat 7. Beautiful. Another great example is You Got Lucky. Once again, it's just a little recurring phrase that sort of links the choruses and the verses together, right? Remember? You got lucky, babe. You got lucky, babe, when I found you. Great use of the whammy bar there. But don't let the simplicity of most of Campbell's parts fool you. The guy can really move when he wants to, but only when it makes sense, only if it's in service of the song. A great example is American Girl. Kind of a fast tune, right? So going into the end, he wanted to give it a little bit of a jolt, so he injects a little bit of flash. Just before it fades out, we get this. The guy had some chops. I always thought I could detect a little country influence in that great solo there. That, of course, Elliot Easton from the Cars, My Best Friend's Girl. And I think Elliot Easton was the reason why back in 1978, when that debut Cars album came out, a young rock kid like me could embrace the band. They were generally considered new wave at the time. They were pretty heavy on the keyboards, and their fashion sense definitely leaned towards that genre. But those great Elliot Easton guitar solos injected just enough rock and roll to give the band a huge crossover appeal. Easton is a left-hander, and incidentally, there will be another left-hander featured later on in this video, although I suspect many of you might be surprised at who it is. In addition to his work in the Cars, he's done some solo stuff and was also a founding member of a fun band called Creedence Clearwater Revisited with original Creedence members Stu Cook and Doug Clifford. No less a guitarist than Slash from Guns N' Roses has cited Easton's concise and melodic solos as a major influence, and nowhere is this more evident than on Candio, the title track from the group's second album. The solo is precisely 8 seconds long, it's fast and furious, and then right back to the tune. By the way, Easton attended Berklee College of Music, so he clearly knows what he's doing in a technical sense, but he's also proof that a formal education in music doesn't preclude playing rock and roll. He never comes across as clinical in his playing. His most famous solo has got to be Just What I Needed. Great piece of work, as usual, short, concise. He says what he needs to, and then he gets the hell out of the way. And he does a great thing in this solo. I talked about this at length in my great guitar solo breakdown for Hotel California. The progression here is E, B, C sharp, and G sharp. Now this G sharp major chord here is not of the key of E. There's one note in the G sharp major that takes us outside of our key, and that's this C note right here. So what does Easton do? He hammers on that C note right when the G sharp chord comes up. Right there, and it really gives that sense of being completely on top of things. Perfect. I really think Terry Kath would be much more well known today if it hadn't been for his tragic death at the age of 31 from a self-inflicted accidental gunshot wound to the head. He was such a huge part of Chicago's sound, not only for his guitar playing, but for his amazing soulful vocals, almost a Ray Charles-like sound. You can hear him on early Chicago tunes like I'm a Man, Make Me Smile, and Color My World. And while I absolutely think Kath belongs on this list of underrated guitarists, one person who did not underrate him was Jimi Hendrix, who cited him as one of his favorite guitarists and once said that Kath was the best guitarist in the universe. That killer 25 or 6/4 solo we heard in the intro is a great example of harmonic minor, A harmonic minor to be exact. It makes great use of the major seventh, which is the key to that scale. And then at a certain point, he kicks that wah pedal into overdrive. And Make Me Smile might be my favorite Chicago song of all. Great jazzy changes in that, starting with C minor, A flat, E flat, G7 sus4, G7, and then leading into the chorus, C minor, B flat over D, E flat, F minor, G7 sus4, G7, and then into the chorus, E flat, 7 sus4, he loves those 7 sus4s, real tension-filled chords. And the intro to the solo on that tune is just nuts, incredibly fast, clean picking, and a very clean and unforgiving tone on his guitar. Of course, Johnny Marr will always be most remembered for his work in the Smiths in the 80s. An underrated guitarist in a criminally underrated band, I might add. But post-Smiths, he's played with some really good groups, including the Pretenders, The, and Modest Mouse, to name a few. Marr is one of those guys who influenced many guitarists, some of whom went on to become more well-known than he is. For example, Noel Gallagher of Oasis, who called Marr an effing wizard. He's basically the king of what we might call jangle pop, lots of 12-string Rickenbackers, sometimes open tunings, the use of capos. These are all things that are characteristic of his style. He's a classic example of that great line from Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. He's strictly rhythm, doesn't want to make it cry or sing. He rarely solos in the traditional sense, and when he does, it's usually chordal things or double stops, but it sounds so beautiful. A great example of Marr's rhythm style is There Is a Light That Never Goes Out from the Queen Is Dead album. I love how he starts with this bright little major chord that kind of captures your attention. And then we get... beautiful lush chords serve as the perfect backdrop to Morrissey's crooning. Take me out tonight. And what about the Headmaster Ritual from Meat is Murder? This time he's an open E tuning. For those of you who don't know, an open tuning is where I tune my guitar to a chord so that when I strum my open strings, as I just did, I played an E chord. So that means my third string goes up a half step to G sharp, my fourth string goes up a whole step to E, and my fifth string goes up a whole step to B. Everything else stays the same. So now, playing a simple shape like this produces this really cool sounding major ninth chord. Just brilliant. I suspect a few of you out there might be thinking, what's he doing playing a George Harrison solo in a segment about Paul McCartney? Well, any diehard Beatles fans out there will know that's actually Paul playing that killer solo right there. And Paul plays more guitar in the Beatles than many people realize. That's just one great example. I once saw an interview with George where sadly he said people were constantly coming up to him and saying that Taxman was their favorite solo of his, and he had to tell them that it was actually Paul. By the way, another great one in a similar style, Good Morning, Good Morning. Once again, it's a furious, legato, almost Indian-sounding thing. Paul again. And McCartney, of course, is the second left-hander that I referred to earlier in the video. Now, I know it's hard to imagine Paul McCartney as being underrated for anything. But remember, I'm not talking about Paul as a songwriter, Paul as a singer, Paul as a bass player. These are the things that most people know him for, and he certainly receives due credit for all of those. But as a guitar player, as I think I'm making clear, a lot of these cool solos, people don't even know that it's him. But Paul's playing abilities go way beyond just flashy solos. His fingerstyle approach on acoustic guitar is also very unique. He's got this funky combination of plucking and little brush strums with his fingers that you don't hear anybody else doing in quite the same way. Blackbird being the classic example. He's used that on a couple of other tunes as well. And jumping ahead to his solo career, Maybe I'm Amazed has to be one of the greatest songs Paul did post-Beatles, with a great guitar solo played by him. Now, there's a very popular live version from the Wings Over America album in which Wings guitarist Jimmy McCulloch plays the solo. But the original studio version was absolutely Paul, and it showcases his uncanny ability to come up with great melodies, not only vocally, but clearly on guitar as well. So that's it for now. I know you guys won't disappoint me in the comments. Let me know who you think I've missed. I know there are many players who would have been worthy to appear here. Like, subscribe if you're enjoying these videos, and we'll see you soon.